It is summertime and it is stinking hot out, and I need you to keep your cool. So, whole purpose of this video, quite simply, is because if you're using a Haltech, the Nexus Rebel for the LSs, it's a new big thing now, right? If you're using it like me, you had to figure a couple things out. I had to figure something out. There was no direct instruction for what I was looking for with regards to fan control specifically. So the system itself, if you got a more recent, more modern a GM product, then, or actually I said GM, there's a lot of products, but the cooling fans on these cars are not a simple, binary on-off type of fan system. These cooling fans are actually a PWM. It's a variable speed fan, right? A lot of newer cars have fans like this. You've got your power, you got your ground, of course, and then you've got a third wire, a smaller gauge wire that feeds control from the computer, from the ECM, all right? And that actually controls the fan speed itself. It pulses, low side pulse to the PWM controller, which is attached to the fan motors, and that drives the variable speed of the fans. Pretty common stuff. It's been going on for a long time now. And yeah, this car has it just like so many other ones do. And the thing with the Nexus, right, the Rebel, is really cool. It's got a built-in PDM, right? It's kind of one of the big things about Haltech is they've got their included PDMs in their system, and it really is cool. I mean, it really is fantastic. Think about it. But so for the of the four that you get with the Haltech, you got a dedicated one for your injectors and your ignition coil, of course. You got a dedicated high output for your fuel pump, and another dedicated one for your thermal fans. And that's kind of the one that we're going to be talking about. How what they call thermal fans, we call coolant fans, whatever, same thing, radiator fans. You got a fourth one, which is an auxiliary, and I ended up using that as part of the fuel system anyway. So that's neither here nor there. The issue, the topic at hand, though, is the cooling fans. How do we control these things? How do we use those outputs are binary style. They're on off, right? They're just analog switches. They're on or off. That's all you got. So how do you run a variable speed fan with a simple on off control? And the short answer is you don't do it by using that output. You can still use that output to actually power the fan, to supply the motor with its 12 volts. That's not a problem. But the actual control as far as the fan speed goes, you don't have to just, splice or jump it to 12 volts or something like that, or make it run all the time, whatever the case is. Well, I mean, the way it works, it doesn't use a 12 volt signal anyway. It's a low reference that actually drives the controller. But what I'm telling you is you can use a strategy within the system that'll allow you to use the fans in the same manner in which the factory uses them, which is variable speed based on, whatever coolant temperature, speed, whatever the case is here. So I'm going to hop into the software. I'm going to show you, I was stumbling around how I figured it out, and then see if I can show you how it works.
All right, so like I said, I couldn't find any direct information. I mean, like real direct information on how to do what I wanted to do. And like everything else, it comes down to a case of learning. I mean, you know what you want to do, you just don't know where to find it. And that's kind of the process you're going to deal with when you've got a brand new system like this you're not used to using. So I knew I needed to make an output, like my own output, right? I needed to do use the configurable outputs and set up, some way to build a control table, a PWM control table that would go ahead and output to the fan controller and would drive the speeds the way I wanted to. So, and that's kind of where I was stuck. I had asked a question in one of the Haltech Rebel LS boards. It's a new, group, of course. So there's not a lot of people yet in there. There's still a lot kind of going on. People getting the system under their, under their grip here. So I can understand where there's not a ton of information. It's not like Holly Terminator where, the mailman's running that in his car. So anyhow, I couldn't find the information I wanted to, or at least not in a direct fashion that I wanted to. So I just did what anybody would do, just start messing around, looking through the software, opening stuff up, opening pages up and stuff. It was when I got down here, and it should have clicked from the beginning, generics. Well, it sounds kind of like the direction I want to go in. I click on generics, and sure enough, here I see things like, okay, well, sensors, conditions, generic outputs. Okay, now that's something I certainly piqued my curiosity. You can set up PID controllers, open loop motor controllers. It's pretty cool actually. The kind of stuff that you can do and the kind of controls you can set up with Haltech in general. I mean, I'm really a fan of it. But specifically, what I was looking at was this generic output. So when I went ahead and clicked on one of them and enabled it, flipped the little blue thing on here, and when you do it, it opens up. It adds a little tier right here. So I'm going to go ahead and add generic output 2. See, and generic output 2. Now it shows up in red because it needs to be assigned, kind of like the pin assignments in Holly. And I'm not actually using it 2. I just wanted to show you how it is when you enable it. Turn that off. So I've got 1 turned on there, and it turns on this generic 1 right here. So I'm going to get into that guy. First thing you're going to do is name it. And of course, what I want, keeping with the Haltech theme, I called it Thermal Fan PWM. And I set up a duty cycle, right? You give you different options here to set it up as a given duty cycle, as a specific frequency, so on and so forth. I know that I want is a duty cycle based table, right? Kind of like what you saw in HP tuners. If you've done your fan setup in HP tuners, you're familiar with how it's set up in there, how GM sets it up, and they use a simple 2D duty cycle table. So that's what I want. And it's going to be a table, as we just talked about. It's not necessarily conditions. It's a variable, so I want this selected right here under tables. Duty cycle settings. This right here actually comes straight from HP tuners. If you go into HP tuners, you go into the fan output, fan controls. One of the cool things that, thanks courtesy of GM, the guys at HP tuners, they display the frequency right there, and the factory frequency of the fans is 128 hertz. So I just went and plugged it in. These other selections are grayed out because they're not, depending on what you choose up here, it'll give you different options that might work down here. It's not a stepper, obviously, and we're not going to use this one specific frequency, or duty cycle rather. It's going to be a variable duty cycle, so that's why this is grayed out here. So I set this up the way I wanted to. Then I go over to the wiring. What I chose to use was, well, I made it very simple, DPO1, so digital pulse output number 1. I decided to go ahead and set it up using this output on the input and output, the auxiliary harness, the output harness, I should say. There's a separate one for input and output. So I chose DPO1 as the pin. I went into the car, grabbed the output harness. I went right to 1, which I think was pin A, if I'm not mistaken. Stuck a wire in there, ran the other end of it into the small connector that I have going into the PWM controller at the motor. I actually made a little Deutsch connector there. So that I can, take the fan on and off and have to cut wires and stuff. So I just depinned the connector and used a pair of jumpers to connect these 2 wires, the one that I set up here to the one at the controller, just to test this stuff out and make sure that it works. It is low side, of course, so this is all set up. And what I did is I just made my own table, right click, and set up my own table access here, and that's what you have here is your thermal fan controller. If you've seen, again, the factory style, then this should look familiar to you, right? You've got your coolant temperatures up here. It's going to be your x-axis, and the values right in here are the different pulse widths, different duty cycles that I'm going to be running on the fan. If you're familiar with GM fans, you know that they don't see 100%. I think anything over 94 or 93%, they actually shut off on you altogether. So I have it matching the factory style, 92 at the top end here. You're also going to notice that unlike the factory, right? And I keep. Okay, sorry, lost you for a second there. It looks like when you flip between programs, the recorder stops. But and I apologize if I sound like I'm underwater. I have no idea what it is. I'm using the onboard mic, so deal with it. Anyways, yeah, I talked about the factory stuff, right? I kept bringing up the factory stuff. So I pulled up HP tuners here side by side, and I'm in the fan section, and here it is. Here is the factory fan control table. Now, again, if you're used to this stuff, you know that you're limited in the temperature axis here. So basically, you can't turn the fans on to your car. Is basically nuclear, but that's a whole other issue. You will notice that there's only it's 1D, right? Just one table going across. There's not really, there is no rows here to deal with. It's just a one row going across. The way I set this table up over here, and the reason why I chose it to do it this way, I've got 2 markers over here, right? I've got a value of 0 and a value of 550, and I use RPM for my y-axis. As I said, there really is none over here. I have to imagine somewhere in the 10,000 behind the scenes, bits of information and pages of information that you don't actually get to see in HP Tuner. Somewhere in there, somewhere in the coding, it must be that the car, the factory controller rather, knows not to run the fan if the engine is off. Here you got 0 RPM, it's not going to work. If you're used to, again, if you're familiar with the Terminator stuff, Terminator software, one of the first things when the systems came out, years ago, and guys were first installing them, one of the biggest annoyances was that every time you went key on with the Terminator X, the fan would start banging away. It didn't care whether it was engine was running or not. If it was up to temp, it was going to run, until it dropped under that temperature threshold. So the factory doesn't have that threshold. It must be coded somewhere in the back where you don't see, or otherwise, it's not out here. So it never became kind of a relevant issue for us here. By the way, here's the frequency 128, like I showed you. I wasn't lying. So coming back to this guy, I decided to make this table exactly as you see here with 2 row axes. Now, the purpose behind this is actually very simple. I don't want the fans to be running when the car is off. If you're familiar at all with when Terminator X's came out right with the Holly, one of the biggest annoyances when the software was new was that anytime the car was up to temp and the key was on, whether the engine was running or not, the fans would be running. And you had to go in there and make your own, smart fan output control stuff. And it worked just fine. It was a workaround for it. Now they have a little checkbox that you tick, and the fans will only run when it sees RPM, which, it's one of those little things. Anyways, I didn't see an option to do that in here. Obviously, I'm making my own, PWM output, so it's not like it's specifically for the fan. System wouldn't know otherwise. But what I did decide to do is make it a 2-row. So anytime the engine is off, obviously 0 RPM, it's going to reference this row right here, which is all zeros. Fan's not going to run. Anytime the car is running, well, the idle's over 550 RPM. So, and it's up to temp. These are the values that it will go ahead and follow, and it works great. Is this the only way to do it or the best way to do it? Probably not. I'm sure there's a better way to do it. I'm a Haltech idiot, but given that this is what I figured on my own, and it does work, I'm not particularly mad about it. So yeah, this is turned out pretty well. So yeah, I got I backtrack here. Generics, turn the output on. I went ahead and set up that output, named it. It's a duty cycle, it's a table. The frequency of your particular fans, mine we saw was 128, and make sure the wiring, the output is set up correctly. I chose DPO1, active on the low side, and then just go ahead and make your table, and experiment, play around with it, see what works for you. But this worked for me. I filmed this. I'm filming this one right now after the fact. I actually did this already a while back, and I had recorded it, but I don't know, I was low on my multivitamin or something like that, and I sounded like Joe Biden. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the video, the snippet of it, fans actually working and testing it out now. But yeah, I think you're going to get a kick out of it, and hopefully this helps somebody out there.
And I went ahead and set up my outputs, and there's my crosshair right there. I should be doing this like on the computer, the recording on the computer thing, but it's a pain in the ass right now in the car. I'm gonna highlight these 2, right? And let's try 50%. Output, 50%. Can you hear the fans? Ha 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 ha. Let's go. Let's go 85%. Crank them up. Output changes 85. Yeah, baby. It's windy in here. So there you go. Pulse width fan control, courtesy of our kangaroo cousins at Haltech. It works. Enjoy.